Can I now welcome to the podium John Ray, Chairman of New Zealand Council of Infrastructure Development. John is a member of the Institute of Directors and either a director or chair of a number of New Zealand companies involved in infrastructure, energy, waste and technology. For 9 years until early 2010, John was Managing Director of Stevenson Group, one of New Zealand's largest private companies with more than 600 employees. He was responsible for the major transformation of this almost 100-year-old company into a successful, diversified investment group with significant interest in construction materials, quarrying, mining, agriculture, engineering and property. In addition to chairing the New Zealand Council for Infrastructure Development, John is a member of the National Infrastructure Advisory Board, which provides independent advice to Treasury and the Minister of Infrastructure. Very warm welcome, John.
Thanks, Lawrence, and thank you to all here today for the invitation to come. On a slightly lighter note, I'm delighted to say that I've dodged a bullet by being invited here, because otherwise I'd have been on a plane to Rio de Janeiro to attend the McKinsey Global Infrastructure Initiative, which Stephen Selwood's on a plane to do. So you've dodged a bullet, so thank you very much. Much better to be in Wellington talking about housing. As you're aware, we in New Zealand rely on a property market to deliver the majority of our housing needs. For a whole raft of reasons that others at the podium will be able to explain better than I, the New Zealand market isn't delivering sufficient housing at the price level the public expects. And this leaves us with several options. One has been already canvassed, and broadly speaking, that is to make it cheaper and easier in aggregate to deliver housing. And this is critical work in the government and council's efforts to do that are to be commended. But its impact will be realised over a long period of time and actually will be restricted only to those who can actually participate in the market. Another option is to expand operations outside the market, principally by increasing investment in Housing New Zealand. This approach requires new money, however, and is likely to recreate and replicate historic outcomes and will not please the Minister of Finance. The final option is the one that I'd like to discuss a bit more detail. It's the combination of the market-based approach of the first option together with the project-oriented approach of the second, and has overseas demonstrated some substantial advantage over both of the alternatives. So by contracting a partner to deliver both affordable and market housing at scale, authorities can incorporate a broad community outcomes into a long-term development agreement, which reduces the overall cost to taxpayers and actually delivers on a wide range of policy objectives. Now that sounds like a bit of a mouthful, so let me just run through that in a bit more detail. The key characteristics of what I'm saying and the key characteristic of the projects are as follows. Firstly, size. Projects need to be large in order to achieve adequate economies of scale, attract market interest and deliver value. Second, project outcomes are broad. Building at scale allows expanded project horizons from units and houses to neighbourhoods and communities, facilitating a much more holistic approach to well-being. Third, contract agreements are long-term to promote whole-of-life quadruple bottom-line decision-making. Delivery partners are tied to a long-term contract and critically held accountable for their performance. Finally, the delivery partner reward is in part or whole generated by the success of the privately sold managed property alongside affordable housing. The image I hope emerging in your minds is of long-term agreement between a public body and the private sector delivery partner to deliver a community. Within that community would be a mix of affordable and private dwellings. Additional services and outcomes related to housing are attached to the agreement with a risk of meeting those objectives transferred to the delivery partner. Facilities maintenance and tenancy management services become not just their obligation, but also their principal means to achieve social outcomes which are bundled into the project. Things like truancy, crime and health are part of a single agreement, and responsibility for achieving these traditionally public outcomes are assumed by the delivery partner. Payment is the key to incentivising desired outcomes under such an arrangement. In the first instance, land is likely a component of the payment, with the risk of developing that land transferred to the delivery partner. Underutilised and undervalued public land is leveraged to subsidise housing development, and over the longer term, the state pays for the development using existing but not new resources, from health, education, justice and housing budgets, depending on outcomes delivered. After all, if new housing is delivering health benefits, and in many cases we believe it will, it's only reasonable that health resources are used to subsidise that outcome. We're not talking about shifting costs around different government departments. We're talking about shifting incentives and accountability of those positions to those who are in a position to actually deliver. The current housing paradigm, from our perspective, has not successfully tied payments to performance, and it has not encouraged accountability, and that has generated very costly consequences for both the Crown and the community. We all know that past and present approaches to housing have led to a lack of supply in some areas and overcrowding in others. Many units are in poor condition, others have been all but abandoned. We know that upwards of a third of Housing New Zealand's $17 billion portfolio isn't meeting need. But we also know that the $5 billion shortfall is actually just the tip of the iceberg, with poor housing outcomes spilling over into healthcare, education, justice, transport, employment and other welfare costs. So the approach that we're advocating is designed to realign responsibilities to those that have the ability to deliver the outcomes and are incentivised to do so. With a mix of risk transfer and performance rewards, we think that's achievable. The goal, in other words, is to achieve more with the same level of investment. Project success from the public's view is an integrated, inclusive and thriving community for less than it would cost the public sector to achieve similar outcomes. Project success from the delivery partner's perspective is measured in dollars, but the hook is that in order to make money, the delivery partner must sell its agreed allotment of private dwellings at the highest possible price. This in turn cannot be achieved unless the affordable social or public houses within that same development contribute to a clean, safe and attractive community. The broad approach that I've just described has been in action in Australia for some time, and in 2011 NZCID led a delegation there to look at 3 such models, and I think they provide useful guidance to policymakers because each represents a separate point on the continuum of change from our business as usual position. First project that we looked at was the Carlton project in Melbourne. It's the simplest and most familiar of the 3 projects and involves the redevelopment of 250 social housing, 700 private apartments, according to a fairly standard design and build contract. The developer agreed to replace existing public housing stock and was given the right to develop co-located properties for sale to private purchasers. The agreement sought to leverage property values, not ancillary services in that case, so was somewhat limited in its ambition. Nevertheless, as an initial low-risk alternative to current practice, it's worthy of consideration here. The next project, underway in Kensington, Melbourne, took the model a step further. It included the redevelopment of around 500 homes, according to a roughly 50-50 split of private to social housing units. Like Carlton, the delivery partner retained rights to sell private property alongside redeveloped public housing, offsetting the direct cost to the state government. Its principal point of difference in that example was that a not-for-profit community housing organisation was established to provide the ongoing property and tenancy management services. The presence of co-located dedicated property management business within the commercial and community objectives was in the earlier stages achieving great broad public policy outcomes. The final project was the most radical. In Bonnyrigg, Sydney, the New South Wales State Government and a private consortium entered into a public-private partnership to design, build, maintain and finance an 81-hectare, 2,000-plus home development. Over a period of 15 years, the consortium agreed to replace 833 public housing units with 700 social and 1,500 private units. As in the previous 2 cases, the major opportunity for the consortium was in successful sale of private units, but social objectives were incorporated into the contract. In its point of difference, the contract was entirely financed by the private sector and therefore shifted a huge amount of the risk away from the taxpayer. So we believe that each of those models is potentially applicable in New Zealand, depending on the objectives that we all seek to achieve, the desire of the communities and the availability of funding and skills. And although the selection of the model will be case-specific, each approach, in essence, desires the same thing: better alignment of public and private sectors' shared objectives. But for this conference's perspective, it should be noted that public-private alignment cannot be achieved unless the public sector is first aligned with itself. Central government will be the principal investor in any major social or public housing development under current legislative settings in New Zealand. The role of local government has to be to facilitate central government investment and lend its expertise across planning and community building. It's also important to recognise that any and all regulatory risk and/or other complications arising from disparate public responsibilities will increase the return on investment demanded by private investors. Before going to market, it is critical that central and local government agree project objectives, allocate responsibilities, commit funding, and be prepared to be held accountable for their activities. If the private sector is to be asked to commit hundreds of millions of dollars to a project, it must have confidence in its partners and the ability for those partners to work together. And we're absolutely certain that the private sector does have appetite to play in this space on these terms. We at NZCID certainly believe that if we can get people such as those that we have here today, that we have an issue, and we agree that we have an issue with access to affordable housing, if we agree that housing is an essential component of healthy, vibrant communities, and we agree that the public sector can and should make a difference, then I have no doubt that government and councils can work proactively and productively with the private sector to deliver the quality housing that New Zealanders can enjoy. Thank you.